Making text orbit a black hole in Blender. Start with a new file, general. As is tradition, we'll begin by deleting the default cube. It knows what it did. And the default light, which has to pay for its sins. And then we're going to start out by setting the render engine to cycles because we need that ray tracing goodness for these effects. First thing we're going to do, add a UV sphere. Now for this effect to work, we need it to be really high res, and 200 by 100 seems to work well for a 1 meter sphere. Looks good. And just to make sure, we're going to shade it smooth. Like that. You can get to that with right clicking on it and shade smooth as well, by the way. I've realized I haven't got my keylog thing going, so we'll start that. And now you can see in the bottom right hand corner, you can see all the things I'm pressing. Great. So we have the sphere. This is going to be what's going to make the black hole and make the distortion that it causes. That's really all we need to do with that, but we're going to add another thing, which is going to be a curve, and it's going to be a Bezier circle, which we're just going to scale up, and this is going to be the orbit that our text follows. Great, easy. This is going to make our animation later really quite trivial. Now we're going to add the text in question. Just going to add a simple text. Looks fine. And we want it to stick to this curve, so we're going to go to the modifier, add modifier, and curve. Curve object is going to be that Bezier circle we added. And now you can see it's sticking to the circle. And what this modifier does is, as far as this text is concerned now, that line, that curve, that circle, is the x-axis. It cannot escape it. And this is perfect. It's not quite orientated correctly for what we want now, so we're going to click on it. We'll go item to get this up. If this isn't showing, by the way, hit N. And we're going to rotate it around X. We're going to rotate it around that curve by 90 degrees. Now we can see it's standing up as we want, but it's back to front. So let's also scale it by -1 to mirror it. Perfect, we've got text. And the joy of this way of doing it means if we take its X location, because that curve is the X-axis, as we change the X location, it orbits and it wraps lovely and it does exactly what we want. Easy. Now, you might want to make text orbit. You probably want to make something else go, so hit tab, write whatever you want in. I am going to say, don't panic. Oh, we don't need the answer. Hit tab to escape. Great, now we've got don't panic on the curve. Perfect. Next thing we're going to do is position our camera so we can see what we're doing. If we select the camera, we want it to be looking down the y-axis. So, yeah, y can be negative, that's fine. X and Z need to be 0. And rotation around X actually needs to be 90. And rotation around Z needs to be 0. Now we're looking directly at the sphere, and we can check this with this here. Boom. We're a little bit close, actually, so let's back out a bit. Perfect. Great. Camera setup, text setup. There's actually going to be a problem that we want later. We want our text to be flying around the equator for the black hole to really sell itself. So we can just click on it. Let's get on our camera view. G, Z, let's move it down. And let's set it about there. That won't affect anything to do with the X. We've got that set up. Now we want to animate our text to orbit. So we're going to select it again. Let's make the dope sheet at the bottom here a little bigger. And we're going to start off at 0. Perfect, that'll do. 0, 0, minus 0.3, right click, insert keyframes. Now we've got a keyframe in our dope sheet. 24 frames a second by default, so if we say 2 seconds per orbit, that's going to reach to 48 frames. And I'm just going to cycle this round to about right. If you're being really careful to make it perfectly looping, you can use your circle pi d is, you can work out how far it needs to go. This is good enough for jazz right now. Insert keyframe. We have 2 keyframes on the dope sheet now. If we go back to the beginning, hit space to run it, we can see it orbits. It's not quite right. It eases in and out, which we don't want. We want it to look like it's always been orbiting, so we're going to select that first keyframe, and we're going to go interpolation mode. I'm going to set it to linear. And now when we play it, it's going to look like it was always moving, no acceleration. Perfect. So that's actually all we need to do in terms of setting up the geometry. The next thing we're going to do is set up the shaders. So we're going to go over to shading, and we're going to start with the black hole. This is the more complicated one, but it's really, really not complicated at all. So we select it, we're going to go to the material tab, and we're going to add a new material for it. So what we want to do, we really don't want this BSDF. We're going to build a little shader chain. So the input we want is actually from this layer weight, because that is going to tell us the angle of the ray hitting the sphere compared to the normal of the sphere at the point. At least that's my understanding of it. And we want it mostly that and less of the Fresnel. So 0.95 blend is about right for that. Now we actually want the reciprocal of this value. So we're going to get the converter. We're going to get a math or maths if you speak language properly. We're going to take this facing, plug it into the denominator, and we're going to set the numerator to 1.0. And as I said, we want the reciprocal, so you have to change this to divide. Important step. That's got that. The next thing we want to do is add the actual shader, and that's going to be a refraction BSDF. And for the index of refraction, we're going to plug our reciprocal in, and then we can plug the output of the shader into the surface. We can already see we're getting a slightly warped kind of thing. And if we change it to the actual render view up there, now it looks a bit weird because we actually have no source of light in this scene, so the ray tracing really has a bad time. That's what we're going to do next. One of the lovely things about the ray tracing is that we can make the text itself emit light rather than trying to arrange lights. So we're going to do that now. We're going to move to the text, give it a new material, and we're going to, I'm just going to make it white. You can of course play with the color however you want, but white is good for now. And you can play with the emission strength. I found 2.2 seemed to work nicely. That was just by experimenting, nothing magical about it. And that actually pretty much sets up what we need. Oh, space isn't this purpley orangey thing. So we can go to the world here, change the color to black. I'm informed space is black. Now it's starting to look a little better. Let's go back to our layout and just see how this is going. So changing it to the render view again, let's see what the camera sees. And let's actually move the text around behind, and we can already see now that we're getting a really good distortion effect. But there is a problem. If I move the 3D cursor, you can see that when the light hits bang on the normal of the sphere, it goes straight through. No diffraction, so you see this little bit coming through. In a black hole, right, that would be going through the center, that should be through the event horizon, that should really be black. There may be a clever way of dealing with this. I didn't find it. So I'm going to use a disgusting hack instead, because I am a disgusting hack. And I'm going to set the 3D cursor, and I'm just going to add a plane. We're going to rotate it around X by 90, so it's normal to the camera. We're going to scale it down, and we can switch back to our render mode, and we can scale it down so that it's covering that awkward bit in the middle that I didn't know how to deal with. Well, let's make the black hole a little bigger. There we go, why not? And it's still covering it. So the important thing is for this plane, the plane shouldn't be there. So we're going to select the plane. As I was about to say, the important thing for this plane is that it exists inside the orbit, but outside the refraction sphere. That way it will block what we need, but it won't block the text. Perfect. But we have a slight problem at the moment still. If we go back to our render view, let's look through what the camera sees. And we're going to move this so it comes around. You can see that the glowing text is now illuminating that plane, and we really don't want to do that. And that's because the plane has the default material. So once again, back to the shading, take that, you go to material view, give it a new material, and we can just use the principle of BSDF for this. We're just going to set it jet black, black like the day I was born, specular down, roughness up. That's going to act like Vanta black, just absorbing everything. So we'll see nothing through it. And now you can see that the text light isn't reflecting off this plane anymore. No one knows we made that dirty, dirty hack. And that actually really is, for a cheap and cheerful, everything you need. You can see, you can get a reasonable kind of thing here, but it's not, it's more of a wacky effect and less of a black hole at this point. So let's really sell it with that space feel. The first thing I'm going to do is something that is completely not what space is like. We're actually going to add some atmosphere to it. So let's return that cursor to the world origin. And we're going to add a cube. I'm going to make that cube big. It's got to be so big that it covers the whole camera's FOV, but not so big that it envelops the camera. So this is perfect. Camera can see nothing but the cube. Now we're going to go back to our shading. We've got the cube selected. We're going to add a new material. Don't want this BSDF. We're actually going to take shader, volume scatter into the volume. And what this is going to do is just add some atmospheric scattering to just give it a bit of glow. Again, you can just play with this. I found 0.075 kind of works good. There's nothing magic about it. You might want more, you might want less. But now if we go back to the layout, set it back to render mode, have a look through the camera, right, you can see that we're getting this scattering and it's like got a glow to it. Looks much nicer. Kind of sells the effect a little bit more. And it makes the event horizon there a bit clearer. So that's nice. Space isn't completely black. There's stuff out there. And so I'm going to cheat a little bit at this point and move you on to a different tutorial with how to make this. What we're going to do is we're going to add a star field. And rather than go through all the process and steal someone else's tutorial, I will put a link in the description that you can follow to see what they did. It's really quite cool, a nice procedural star field. I'm going to cheat at this point and I'm just going to pick it out of a project that I did earlier. So I know for a fact that it's in this project, and I'm just going to take the world shader where it has a star field. And so we're back in the shader view here. Now I've appended that. I'm going to go to the world, and we're going to change this from just being a background to take this group star field. You won't have this. If you haven't appended the star field shader, it won't be there. You'll have to follow that tutorial to work out how to make it. This is just efficient. And plug that out to the surface. It's going to take a little while to update the lights now. The downside of this procedural star field is it can be a little heavy to chew through, but as you can see, it really looks like a lovely effect from very little effort, just for eye candy. Let's go back. Let's see what it looks like. Update the lights once again. And we're almost ready to go now. So as this kind of chews its way in, you can see that now we're really selling the black hole effect because some of those stars are getting warped around it. This really benefits from lots of samples, so the low sampling in the viewport won't be perfect. But there's one more thing we can do to make it look even nicer, and that's compositing. Now to do that, we need to actually make a render first. So to save time, I'm going to take this down, way down. It's just 25%, and let's just go 1080 and 1080, so it's square. And let's move the camera in a little bit. Great. And then I'm just going to hit F12 to render it, so we'll be waiting a little time. Now if I was good, I would chop the video here and okay, and I'm back. OBS really didn't like that, so we are restarting the recording. But the render is complete, and we can see that if we go to compositing at the top here, and we're going to tick use nodes, and we can see that we've got the render there. And there's tons you can play around with here, but the thing that we're just going to do is add a simple glare filter, because apparently atmospheric scattering wasn't enough. Let's see what we're doing. So we're going to add output, viewer, go there. Come on, you go over there. That's good. Let's see what we're seeing. So, I mean, it's an effect. It's not the one I'm looking for. I'm going to go fog glow, we're going to give a high fog glow, and let's make it a bit bigger. Yeah, looks alright, just gives it a bit more polish. Probably we could just set the scattering, but anyway, this is good. And that's really everything we need to do. Go back to this layout. We can set, oh, hello, are we? There we go, we're back. Frame start 1, frame end 48, that's what we decided. We could set this quality way back up to the top. We want to have a lot more samples, so 512 in the rate, and let's add some denoising just to make it great. In fact, yeah, you can probably get away without this if you set the samples high enough. Perhaps the atmospherics aren't that difficult. Play around with it, and then once you're ready to get the whole animation, you're hitting Control and F12, and then you're waiting because that could take a while. Hopefully, it comes out all right. Yeah, I guess you will find it hanging around in the /temp or wherever you decide to output it. Great. Mission accomplished.